Yo, welcome back to Unboxable episode 22. Another solo episode, of course. Today's topic, if you read the title, which everyone should have read the title, is suffering. So, as we all know, even Jesus Christ suffered. Throughout history, everyone has suffered. And I'm not going to break this down long form. I'm just going to get straight to it. So, essentially, there's a quasi-crystal projection which projects a 4D Metatron's cube in the form of Saturn. That's why there's a hexagon on top of Saturn. Hexagram. And then we live in the shadow of that. This is proven through quantum physics. So you can look at the quasi-crystal experiment. It's a model and a projection. So we're essentially living in a 2D light matrix, which is in the shadow of Metatron's cube being Saturn, which that is in the shadow of an eight-sided quasi-crystal. Now that's important when we move on, because then you understand why people worship Saturn. The cross is a one-dimensional cube that's been folded out. The Mecca is the black cube. Jewish people wear a cube on their head in a ritual. And so we're seeing a lot of these kind of symbolic, also kind of low-key hidden worshiping rituals, purposes, and symbols of Saturn. And Saturn, pretty much, I don't know, they consider it to be God. And Saturn is the teacher of suffering, essentially. So in order for us to transcend these animalistic instincts and kind of come into our God body, you can call it, you have to suffer. It's a transformative to men. It's like there's that saying, it's like soft men create hard times create tough men create blah, blah, blah. It goes on. And that's also makes a lot of sense. I mean, just thinking of me, you gotta forge iron in the fire. And when I think of my life, being comfortable and easy shit in my life never got me anywhere. It got me comfortable for the second, but when I've really struggled and suffered through my life, which I have a lot, that's really what built character in me, built resilience, intelligence, knowledge, wanting to adapt. That's really what got that shit going. And when you start looking at it, here, I'll tell this story. And I made sense of this to this one girl I was talking to at a conference a couple of years back. And she was telling me how she went through a lot of shit when she was in college, and her lung ended up being fucked up. And she had to go through a bunch of surgeries and shit, and it literally derailed her life by years. And she was fine before that, you know what I mean, and normal, she said. But after that happened, that lung incident, she told me, and this is before I even told her any of this, she told me she went on an unquenchable journey and had an unquenchable thirst to fix lung problems and diagnose these different things within lungs and do this stuff in the medical field, because she was a neuroscience student at the time. She had a baccalaureate, but she was pursuing a doctorate. And just that little example shows you kind of how this suffering, her having to deal with these lung problems and kind of go about her day with these problems and suffering through this, really lit this fucking fire inside of her. Here's another example. When a dude goes through a breakup, it's always a joke, this dude's gonna fucking end up in the gym. And it's because that suffering and that shit inspired you. It lit the flame under your ass, so to say, so that's why you want to fucking go in there and get shit done. And this kind of shines also a new light on why and what society really was when women were more oriented towards the children, didn't really have to work. They had to work, of course. It's probably harder, honestly, to take care of a goddamn kid, and it has more of an emotional burden than it is to do most jobs. But essentially what I mean is the men would suffer and go to work all day, and so the wife and so the kids didn't have to. And the men would bring that burden of suffering on to transform themselves to attain more, because you need that suffering. That suffering is taught to us from Saturn. Without the suffering, you cannot bring heaven on your earth. If you want to go to heaven, your roots must touch down to hell. So whenever I go through some shit, whenever some shit bad happens, I always immediately think, oh, this is how it's going to benefit me, and think that it happened to me. So, for example, the last thing that happened to me was just a woman. And that's probably one of the easiest things I've ever been through. But a woman, they break your heart. You want to be a better man, you know what I mean? That song Power Trip by Miguel and J. Cole. He talks about how he's up all night power tripping, because he doesn't know what to do. He's going back and forth, you know what I mean? And that alone is lighting a fire under someone's ass. So there's an Ab-Soul song, and this is really profound. And he says, ride the tide, don't fight with the current that guided you. Melt that ice round the furnace burning inside of you. So the furnace burning inside of us essentially is this trauma and suffering that we've been through that kind of lights that flame and that ambition under our ass. And that can, let's say you have a trauma with women, and you've been through 3 different girlfriends, and it's hella traumatic, and you don't know how to move forward. But you found a new girl, and now you're happy, and you're comfortable, and you're satisfied, and you're just working a 9 to 5, making 40 grand a year, whatever the fuck it is, and you're satisfied. The way to melt the ice around that furnace within you would be, of course, this is, on some self-destruction shit, but really destruction is another form of creation. Donnie Darko said that. This is a weird way to think of it. This is very true. There's a method to the madness. Pain will prosper always. So if that dude that had that problem with women purposely self-destructed and went through that problem again with another woman to reinvigorate this trauma, melt that ice, and really go through the flame again and get suffering going again, that's going to absolutely catapult his progress. And it's fucked up, but that's how the world works. And, I have a lot of friends, and I know a lot of people, the best thing for them that could ever happen to them is if, their parents said, hey, get the fuck out the crib, dog. Because I'm 24, and I know some people that are old that still live with their parents, or if their girlfriend left them, that'd be amazing for them. And most people would be like, what? That's so fucked up. Girlfriend leave? No, that's how the world works. They're going to sit there comfortable and not do shit until something happens and they have to do something about it, until there's some suffering being inflicted and someone has to get up. No one's going to get up from the couch if you got a butler bringing you fucking food and water all day, unless you're someone put a knife in that motherfucker, If there's a knife on your ass, you're going to get up from the couch and go do some shit. Pain will always prosper, and that's just how shit goes, And looking at how societies went and esoteric groups knowing this concept of Saturn being a suffering teacher to develop men and develop humans, it's kind of weird how society flipped. And looking through that lens, you can understand that dudes throughout history have suffered and helped their women and their kids. And that would have been fine. And if they phrased it like that and kind of put out that metaphysical knowledge out there, that esoteric meaning hidden knowledge, purposely kept secret to maintain control of the Saturn worship and Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ lived till 33. You have 33 vertebrae. And you have a pineal gland. And that story is really allegorical and actually kind of pagan in its roots, honestly. Jesus Christ wasn't his name. His name was Yeshua ben Yosef. The letter J wasn't even in the fucking Hebrew alphabet. But that's historical, by the way. So Jesus is Yeshua, but so we'll say Jesus for the time being. Jesus got nailed to the cross. He suffered and he died for people's sins. It's all about suffering. It really is. How much pain can you get through? How much suffering can you get through? And let's talk a little bit about I like Jesus, Yeshua, his story and whatnot a lot, but we could also talk about Buddha, a couple of his quotes. He talked about desire. Desire is the root of all suffering, but there's no way to rid anyone of desire because you're just going to desire not to desire things. So it's kind of a paradox in itself. So it's just like eternal suffering is pretty much what he said. Like when you break that down, desire is the root of all suffering. Okay, well, I desire now not to have to desire anything. You can't. So We're all gonna have to suffer, you know, and that's kind of the point of like making yourself mentally stronger with these ice baths, or taking fucking weird long ass hikes and shit, like things that are tough for you to do, you should do. Now, a lot of people have to compensate. I mean, a lot of people had a really plush life, didn't have to fucking worry about anything. So they're gonna have to do a lot more shit. They're gonna have to take a lot more fucking ice baths. They're gonna have to fucking climb a lot more mountains or whatever the fuck it might be, because they don't have that natural suffering pain mechanism within inside of them. So they're gonna have to endow it within them, maybe daily, you know, because at the end of the day, the kid from a war-torn country who watched his fucking parents get blown up by a fucking bomb, he's gonna have a lot more of that fire inside of him, you know. Probably to topple a whole government is his idea, rather than Jim Joe, who had two parents and never had to worry about anything. He's still living at his house, fucking 20-something years old, you know. Like, Jim Joe's never gonna do anything. He's never gonna amount to anything unless there's suffering is brought into his life somehow, you know. And this is how shit's always been, sadly, you know. And we can kind of light away the dark, you know. We could kind of, I think we can move our dimension, essentially. I think we can move our dimension forward. I think the way things progress, and if you look at the fourth dimension is the Tesseract. So if you look at the Tesseract, it's always, I had a dream like 4 years ago. And in this dream, I was on an alien spacecraft. And I'll get into dreams on another episode because they're not fucking dreams. They're way different than what you think they are. They're subconscious and it's actually the astral plane and shit, but either way. So I was on a spacecraft. I remember there was a woman with like purple fucking hair or some shit, like looking fucking like she dresses from the future, dude, pretty much. We were on a spacecraft. She had a clipboard and like a lab coat on, like a white lab coat, had crazy looking hair, and she was like showing me shit like schematics and math and all types of shit on this paper, and then was showing me this ever-changing cube that was just changing its shape and form and stuff. And that's like, I think it was showing me the fourth dimension in the Tesseract, and it was showing me the sacred geometrical piece that changes. And I think due to that just changing, it can change its dimensions. Like, due to the ever-changing nature and expansion and things collapsing, just through that, I think we can get out of suffering. I think we can move into the next dimension. So don't let this be just, you know, completely nihilistic, but that's how the world works. It's always worked like that. So make sure you do something hard today. Make sure you suffer as much as you can. You know, even if you gotta only wait till dinner to eat, or you gotta go to lunch with your buddies and not eat lunch and watch them eat and sit there, whatever, literally whatever, you need to suffer. So we're gonna conclude with that today. Grant me health, wealth, happiness, and well-being. Please hear this from the sufferings of your humble servant.